Hey friends, I've noticed a couple of videos going around recently about the book of Job, and it's my contention that the book of Job isn't quite doing what some people think the book of Job is doing. Let me draw this into focus just a little bit. So the most recent video that I saw on this was actually last night, and I saw a creator say that the book of Job was the trigger for their deconstruction, their religious deconstruction. Now, that's not a bad thing, because those who are deconstructing are typically deconstructing from a fundamentalist tradition of some sort, where the theology is toxic and harmful. And so it would be good to deconstruct from that tradition, to remove oneself from that toxic and harmful theology, to unlearn that bad theology, and to start anew. To relearn theology that doesn't carry the same sort of toxic baggage. But see, the depiction of God as a monster, which I think is the takeaway for many people when reading the book of Job, I don't think that that's exactly what the book of Job is up to. And so I want to talk about that some in the next couple of minutes that I have in this video. So let's put this a little bit in setting. Let's think historically first. So the authorship for the book of Job is really one of the more disputed debates within sort of academic biblical studies. Somewhere between the 7th century before the Common Era up to maybe the 4th century before the Common Era is kind of this few centuries timeline that's often given for the book of Job. But there does seem to be quite a bit of convergence on the idea, both that this is a post-exilic text, and I'll tell you just what that means. It's a post-exilic text that maybe we can narrow down to being authored somewhere between, more specifically, like late 6th century up through the 4th century before the Common Era. Now that matters. That date of composition matters because we've got a lot of things happening within the history of Southwest Asia at this time. So Israel and the tradition of Israel has been a small country, a small group, a small nation state, a small people historically that has had very few periods of autonomous rule. And Israel has been trapped between many warring empires. The Ptolemaic and Seleucid empires, for example, were in conflict. This is the backdrop for like the Hanukkah story as told in the book of the Maccabees, where the temple is occupied and the Maccabean revolt is to expel the occupiers from the temple. So that's trapped between two warring empires, Ptolemaic and Seleucid. The Babylonian Empire to the east is an important note for this video. The Neo-Assyrian Empire wiped out northern Israel. The Persian Empire actually defeated the Babylonian Empire and restored Jews to Jerusalem. But this is just all to say that Israel has been a small people, a small nation state, surrounded by larger empires. When the Babylonian Empire did conquer Jerusalem, they sent the ruling class into exile. And that is what is known as the exilic period, during the period of the Babylonian exile. Now, it is the Persian Empire that defeats the Babylonian Empire, and the Persian Empire allows the return of the Jews to Israel. This is told in like the books of Ezra and Nehemiah. If you're interested in that, there's a real problematic religious purification that comes along with the return, as told in Ezra and Nehemiah. Those Jews who intermarried while in exile were told to divorce their spouses and to abandon their kids. So there's some really problematic history that is captured during this period. That's too far afield from this video. But the reason that I share this with you is because if it is the case that the book of Job is an exilic or post-exilic text, that helps inform the way theologically that we may interpret what's happening in the book of Job. See, the book of Job opens with this scene, and this is where many people say God is such a monster. And now I think, listen, the book of Job is human authored. The source is anonymous. I don't think that the dialogue, the prologue, the setup here, between God and Ha-Satan. We have to remember Satan isn't a personified individual at this point in the tradition of the scriptures of Israel. Ha-Satan is just the accuser, the tempter, the tester, the one who sort of like puts God's people to the test. That's the idea of Hasatan, not a personified Lucifer with the pitchfork and horns and stuff. We're not to that point in theological development just yet. So Job opens with this dialogue between God and Hasatan. And Hasatan says, hey, you got this real righteous guy named Job. Let's see how righteous this dude is when I ruin his life, essentially. So God certainly is complicit in Job's suffering, which is why many people say, listen, God, I don't want to believe in a God that would be complicit in such suffering. Good, fine. That's fine. So I get that, right? I get that like starting point for people's religious deconstruction. I get this as ammunition to motivate an atheist argument that look at what a monster God is. I would just say everybody can read the text however people want to read the text, right? And that's fine. I just don't think that prologue is intended to say anything about God. It's more about critiquing a system of justice. I think the book of Job writ large is about critiquing the form of retributive justice. The idea of retributive justice is that if you do bad, then you will be punished. If you do bad, bad things will happen. But if you do good, you will be rewarded. If you do good, good things will happen. That is the idea of retributive justice. Now listen, retributive justice is still with us today. The criminal justice system, if you break the law, then you are punished, right? That is an idea of retributive justice. So although Job is written 6th century before the Common Era, these ideas are still with us today in the 21st century. And so maybe we can't fully embody the cultural context of the author of Job. Certainly, the system of justice that is retributive justice is something that we would be wise to take a second look at even today. And so Hasatan says, hey, you got a righteous guy. Let's see how righteous he is when I kill his kids and kill his livestock and ruin his crops and et cetera, make him have boils all over. It's a really terrible scene. It's a lot of suffering. But see, the idea here is that Job is a righteous guy, so bad stuff isn't supposed to happen. When Job's friends come and visit Job, they peddle the same theological conventional wisdom, the same form of retributive justice. They say, Job, you must have messed up, dude, because look at all the bad stuff that has happened to you. Look at how you are punished. And Job says, no, I'm righteous. I'm blameless. I've not committed any sin. And he cannot convince his friends. His friends are like, no, dude, you are punished. You might as well just admit it. You messed up, right? So it's this engagement within the framework, this system of retributive justice. And I think it is important to point out the composition and the date of authorship, or at least the suggested period of authorship, because during the Babylonian exile, all that stuff that I just talked about, during the Babylonian exile, if you are in exile, that is a bad thing. It is easy to believe that you are in exile because you have done wrong, because you have strayed from your covenant commitments with the divine, that you have sinned and you are now being punished. And in the prophetic tradition, in the texts of a similar period, Ezekiel, for example, makes mention of Job. In the prophetic framework of the day, retributive justice was a big deal. The Deuteronomistic historian, that is a retributive justice model. Do good, get reward. Do bad, you'll get punished. And so I think Job is written to challenge the notion of retributive justice, to say, you know what, sometimes the righteous suffer. And I don't think God God features in the story. I'm not trying to say anything I'm not trying to defend God here. I just think to read the story as a critique of God doesn't fully exploit the depth and incisiveness of the critique. I think the critique is not against God per se. I think the critique is against the conventional theological wisdom of the day that said retributive justice, do good, get rewarded, do bad, get punished, because everybody thought I'm in exile. Certainly we're being punished for doing wrong. And I think Job is a story to push back on that notion and to say sometimes the righteous suffer. Why do bad things happen to good people? That book was popular in the 1980s or so. This is the first iteration of that. The Book of Job in the 6th century before the Common Era says, listen, man, sometimes bad shit just happens. Sometimes the righteous suffers, and the mysterious God, sometimes we just can't make sense of that, but retributive justice is not the best framework for justice. So that's what I think the Book of Job is all about.